Sorry I had to break this up into two videos. The time length on the video ran out. Again, this is going to be a little bit longer video than what I normally make, and I apologize for that, but I want to get some good information out to you guys again. So like I was saying, the next evolution in money is the cryptocurrency, and it's a return of back to a commodity-backed money. Some of the inherent natures in cryptocurrencies are, or what backs them, is the network adoption, the amount of people that are accepting it and using it as money. And to me, the bigger thing that backs it is the validity or the data that is contained on the open source decentralized ledger, and that this data is cryptographically secured. Now that sounds like a mouthful of stuff, and all that is saying that the information, the Bitcoin that you have, you can trust. That there is a level of trust that is unsurpassed in Bitcoin by any other type of money, even gold and dollars. If I handed you a gold bar, you don't know 100%, or you can't trust that 100% that gold, unless you're some type of I think they're called metallologist, or some type of metal expert, that the gold I'm giving you is real gold. You don't know that the dollar that I'm giving you is not counterfeit. How often do you go into the store and someone takes a yellow marker or that counterfeit marker, or they have to check it through the watermark, and you're still not sure that that money is real? Counterfeit bills are passed all the time. When you get a cryptocurrency, you can rest assured that first of all, that the money is valid, that it's real, and that it was issued by the network. That's one thing. The second thing, you know that you're getting the money from the rightful owner, and once you take ownership of it, it cannot be taken from you. If you go to, and people say, well, you can't take my money away from me. No, I can't. But believe you me, don't pay your taxes and see if the United States government cannot seize your assets. People say, well, Bitcoin can be seized. Bitcoin cannot be seized, or you can't be compelled to give your money up. The network knows that you, based on you holding the private keys to that Bitcoin, or the rightful owner of that Bitcoin. The network of computers that is reaching consensus does not care that the United States government threatens you with 40 years in prison or puts a gun to your head. It's still not going to release your Bitcoins or your cryptocurrency unless they're able to compel you or scare you into giving up your private keys. If you refuse to give up the private keys, the Bitcoins or the cryptocurrency, and I'll say this real clearly for some people that don't quite understand it, because people like to argue with me over this fact, they cannot get the money. They cannot get those Bitcoins. Unless you give up your private keys, no one in the universe can get your money. And now that goes with Bitcoin. Now, if there is a hack of some type of smart contract or something like that, you can be scammed out of your money. But if they're unable to get your private keys, if you're diligent with your private keys, or you have your private keys on a hardware wallet like I have, then you are pretty much safe from someone taking or forcefully taking your money. No other currency offers you that security. Your bank account can be seized and all your money taken. The government can kick your door in and take your fiat. They can take your gold, for all you gold bugs out there. That can be taken from you, and it has been taken in the past. One thing I didn't mention on that Bretton meeting after World War II, it was illegal in the United States for the individuals to possess gold. and the government required and took gold from private individuals and did not let us have it. So this isn't something that's unprecedented in history. So if you study your history, you can see that everything can be taken from you by someone that has a bigger gun than you or has the ability to compel something from you. The only thing that cannot be taken from you by force, unless you give it to them. Again, if somebody puts a gun to your head or they threaten you with 40 years in prison, you have a decision to make. But it's not that they were able to take your Bitcoin. You decided to give your private keys up and not face 40 years in prison. And that's something that's very important. So let's move on. Now, why is consensus valuable? Consensus, well, first of all, what is consensus? And it's the ability of a globally and distributed, openly distributed network of uncorrelated CPUs. And I say CPUs, a lot of you guys, well, CPUs, miners, graphic cards. I use CPUs interchangeably with those things to reach universal agreement on the state of ownership contained on a ledger which is open and shared amongst all network participants. So all the computers that make up the network reach agreement on an ownership state, and it provides this provides a trustless medium of exchange, store of value, and deferred payment, a method of deferred payment. So what do I mean here? Who owns what particular Bitcoin? Without consensus, our network would have no value, or Bitcoins would have no value, because the rightful owner of the Bitcoin could not be established unless consensus is reached amongst the network. So by the network being able to reach a consensus where all the holders or writers to the ledger agree that this particular wallet owns this particular amount of Bitcoins, is one of the things that makes Bitcoin valuable. In that it provides a trustless means, because there's agreement amongst the network, we can rest assured that ownership is set on who own or what wallets own what, and the key holders of those wallets are the ones that can utilize those Bitcoins or cryptocurrencies. Consensus is measured by the network's ability. So how do we measure one consensus method of one cryptocurrency over another? And that's a simple thing, that the better the consensus of a cryptocurrency is. So let me take a step back. Not all cryptocurrencies are equal in that they all can't reach an equal level of consensus. They can't all reach the same level of certainty as to the state of their particular blockchain. Some do it better than others. The unit of measure, or how we determine that, is the network's ability to guarantee good outcomes occur while simultaneously at the same time guaranteeing no bad outcomes occur. So a good outcome would be, in effect, that the person or the wallet that contains the particular cryptocurrency is the rightful owner of that cryptocurrency. That when a transfer of ownership occurs, that's valid, that transaction is valid, recorded, and can't be changed. Bad things on the network are things like increased coin supplies, where there's supposed to be a limited number of coins, and then the blockchain, the total limit of coins is increased. Somebody through a malicious act. Or there's a double spend that occurs. Somebody sends a Bitcoin to one entity and sends and I'm using Bitcoin, but a cryptocurrency to that same cryptocurrency unit to another entity at the same time, or is able to create a double spend. Those are the things that are bad outcomes. So the more or the more often a network is able to guarantee, and the key word here is guarantee, the good outcome while simultaneously guaranteeing no bad outcomes, the stronger the consensus is. At this point, Bitcoin has the strongest consensus mechanism in terms of proof of work. So it's able, better than any other blockchain because of the size of it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as you understand some of the fundamentals about Bitcoin, is able to, better than any other blockchain, guarantee a good outcome and guarantee that no bad outcomes occur. So when you get a Bitcoin, you can rest assured that it's your Bitcoin, that it's a real Bitcoin, and nobody else has that Bitcoin, and that the supply of those Bitcoins is regulated and will never be changed. Or the overall supply, let me put it like that. This guarantee is what provides validity to ownership of assets as well as to debts and credits listed on the blockchain. So the amount of Bitcoin that you have is valid. That means that one day you don't wake up and there's 3 unaccounted for Bitcoins, or there's 3 less accounted for Bitcoins. You go to bed with 1 Bitcoin, you wake up with 1 Bitcoin, and that there's a consistency there, so that the data on your debits and credits is valid. The ability of a network to accurately record financial transactions and reach consensus without the need to trust a third party is one of the primary reasons cryptocurrencies are valuable. So the ability for the network to accurately record financial transactions and reach consensus without, and here's a key point, without the need to trust a third party. Every time we conduct a financial transaction, we, in essence, need to trust a third party, unless we're dealing in cryptocurrency. Now, I know you guys, most of you have heard the traditional example. If I spend my credit card or I go to the store and buy something, the bank has to act as a third party intermediary. And a lot of people in the Western world are fine with that. I don't know why, but we continue to trust the banks, even though many shenanigans have been played by banks throughout the year, and they've driven numerous amounts of people to poverty, and they really don't deserve the trust we put in them. They take advantage of that all the time. You'll see that more and more as we go through this presentation. But a lot of folks, so I want to throw another caveat into this conversation here about trusted third parties. When you do a cash transaction, I had someone tell me, well, if I pay in cash, I don't have to, or gold, I don't have to have a trusted third party. And my response to that person was, well, yes, you do. You have to trust that if we're dealing in gold, is the gold real? If I handed you a brick of gold and said, give me your car, I'll buy your car for this brick of gold, and you have to ask yourself, would you do it? If you're the typical person, you may have some strong reservations of that, to do that. Why? Because you need to have a third party come in and validate that the gold that I'm giving you is real, and do things like, well, what is the carat of the gold? Most of us don't know. We can't look at it and tell. How much does it weigh? We don't know. We would need an expert in gold. I forgot the word, maybe metallurgy, something to that effect, to validate that gold was real. Same thing with dollar bills. I go to the store and I buy a 25-cent pack of gum. Well, Nah, I think I'm comfortable, and the person that's selling me that gum is comfortable with that. I go buy a $12 million plane in cash, and I give somebody $12 million. You best be assured that they're going to need a third party to validate that cash, A, is real, B, that it's all there, and C, to validate where I got it from to make sure that no one else can come back and take it. If you think about Bitcoin, in both instances, or in all three examples that I just gave, there's no need for a third party to be involved. If I give you Bitcoin for your car, you know that the Bitcoins are real, that I possess them, and there's no need to bring in a third party to validate anything. If I go buy a piece of gum with Bitcoin, there's no need to have someone validate that the Bitcoin is real or that I own the Bitcoin. Same goes for if I go out and buy. I don't have $12 million, guys. Far from it. So, but no one needs to go and validate that my Bitcoin is real, that I own it, and that transfer was completed. That transfer of ownership was completed from me, the buyer, to you, the seller. So again, that provides tremendous value toward Bitcoin. Now, next slide says, not all cryptocurrencies are created equal. Cryptocurrencies provide a variety of methods to reach consensus. Now, some of the things to consider when we're talking about consensus is liveliness versus security. What I mean by liveliness is, how fast do I need to have these transactions done, and what level of security am I willing to give up to increase the liveliness of my blockchain? Simply, if you pit the need to do something quick, am I going to give up a level of security in terms of, do I need to have 100% consensus amongst all the computers within my network? Or is it okay that I have transactions processed so that I can increase the speed of my network, but I don't need to have necessarily all the nodes agree? Some blockchains choose one over the other. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but that's a good reason as to why I believe there's room for multiple cryptocurrencies in this space. Depending on the situation, you might not need a completely 100% lockdown secured network. You may be, if you're playing a video game or something to that level, you may need it to be faster. You may place a emphasis on speed over security. If I am building a global network or a global GPS system for autonomous cars to use, I may need a higher level of security, but I also may need it to be lively. If it's Bitcoin and it's being used primarily, as it is now, let's say it stays like that, as a store of value, then I may not need it to be fast, but we may need a hyper level of security. So again, these things are going to evolve, but that's one thing to consider, the liveliness versus the security. And I advise you, when you go and invest in your particular projects or tokens or currencies, that you question, is liveliness being emphasized here, or security? Is there a level of both? And is it adequate, or do you think that whatever it's emphasizing, is it adequate to satisfy you? The second thing is a level of centralization. Some coins, in terms the consensus model, has a governing body, such as like a coin like EOS or Ripple. I know a lot of people don't like Ripple or EOS because there is a high level of centralization. The more decentralized, the more trusting you can be of the coin. And the reason is kind of self-evident. if a governing body or a group of individuals or people have the ability to manipulate the consensus model of a coin, then again, you have to ask yourself, can I trust these people? If you have to ask yourself, can I trust these people or this individual or this group of individuals, then that's a lesser level of trust, in that I don't have to trust anyone. If the network and the consensus model is independent of people, such as in the case of Bitcoin, then you can have a truly trustless system, and that would be, although I use the word trustless, it is the most trusted form of a system. When we use money, and when I say money, I'm talking about fiat money, we have to have a certain level of trust in a central bank. But when we use Bitcoin, we trust a network of computers. Do you and in my instance, I'm speaking for me, I trust the network of computers more than I trust any person or any group of people on the planet. The machine does not have a vested interest in gains. Machines aren't selfish. Machines aren't greedy. And if we're true to ourselves about human nature, we're all selfish, greedy individuals, and we seek to operate for our own good. We have to deal with each other, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when you have creatures or people as they are created, it makes it hard to trust them. With cryptocurrencies, that concern is alleviated. You can operate with certain cryptocurrencies and not have to trust other individuals. Again, another thing that makes it considerably more valuable and considerably better than any existing monetary system that's ever existed. Governance of nodes is something else that you need to think about in terms of what gives the cryptocurrency valuable. The better the governance model of the token or the cryptocurrency, the better the governance of consensus. How does that network reach consensus? In Bitcoin, consensus is reached through proof of work. With coins versus, and I have on here, versus EOS or Ripple, where you have either a delegated group of nodes, the community votes on a node, like in the case of EOS, or you have, in the case of XRP, a centralized form of governance where a small party or group of nodes determines what transactions are valid or not valid. And I'll give you the name of that consensus model in the consensus models that I'm going to cover. I'm going to cover proof of work. I'll tell you guys the other ones, and you let me know in the comments if you want me to go over those consensus models and the details of them. I'll do that later, but that's a lot of work, so I'll do that if you guys want it. Let's talk about currency has no priorities on each measurement to determine its value add. So the currency has to set a priority on each of these things, and then it's up to you to determine the value that that particular token has, or the community, or the people that use it. It's how the liveliness, the level of centralization, and all these things, liveliness versus security, level of centralization, and governance of nodes, all those things are related to how the network reaches consensus. And again, it's that consensus that is one of the key cornerstones that provides the cryptocurrency value. Examples of consensus models are proof of work, and I'm going to give you a couple examples of each. And you guys I would encourage you to go out and look up these coins, not necessarily to buy them, but to understand how these coins reach consensus. They're very different, and this is something I think you would want to understand before you invest in a coin, since it is one of the things that gives your particular coin value. Some more popular consensus models in the cryptocurrency space today are proof of work. That's Bitcoin and Ethereum. Then there's a proof of stake, which is coins like Cardano, Qtum, and Omise Go. There's proof of authority, a popular coin, a VeChain, and another coin you may or may not have heard of, Viva Coin, also uses a proof of authority model. One that I like a lot, I'm not going to spend any time in this video covering it, but full disclosure, keeping it 99 with you guys, I own Matrix AI, and one of the reasons I like this coin is the Markov chain Monte Carlo consensus model that it uses. I think this is one of all 6 I have listed here. Can't say one's better than the other, but I think it's one of the more effective, let me put it like that, consensus models. Then there's the proof of contribution. Coin Cybervein is using that. You may want to take a look at that. And then I know a lot of people own Ripple and Stellar Lumens, and they use what's called a Byzantine agreement. And again, before you invest your money, I know probably 99% of people have bought Ripple and Stellar Lumens, and they don't understand the Byzantine agreement and how that network reaches consensus. Depending on your level of understanding of that, if you understand it, it may change your mind as to whether you want to own those coins or not. Because there's a lot of trust involved in a third party if you own Ripple or I know a lot of people, Stellar Lumens is fine. They both use basically the same consensus model, although Stellar is somewhat a little bit more decentralized in terms of its node governance than Ripple, but both are very centralized compared to the other consensus models listed. So again, make that short and sweet. I would encourage you to understand a currency / tokens consensus model before you put your money in. Now, the most popular form of consensus model is proof of work, and I said I want to keep each one of these segments to under an hour, so I'm going to quickly go over that because I know a lot of people ask me, well, what is proof of work? And most people bumble and stumble through an answer. So I'm going to talk to you guys real brief. I was going to do an illustration on this, but I'm not, about proof of work and what it is so you can explain it to other people. So basically, proof of work is the method that Bitcoin and a coin like Ethereum currently, although Ethereum is planning to move to proof of stake, but currently both Bitcoin and Ethereum use proof of work to accomplish consensus on its blockchain. Proof of work starts, and I want you to think of proof of work as when you guys log into a particular website, there's these things called CAPTCHAs, where it's a DDoS attack defense. So to keep someone from DDoSing a website, a series of pictures is presented to you, and it may say select all the pictures with lights in it or red lights, and you have to go in and select each picture. Well, that's kind of proof of work on a very, very rudimentary level. So the way proof of work works is that when a transaction's sent on the Bitcoin network, or a group of transactions is sent, a challenge is issued by the network where there is a puzzle that needs to be solved before that transaction can be written to the network, and then that answer is used by the other nodes within the network or the other computers within the network to validate that that transaction is valid. Now, it's a little game that all the computers are playing with each other, and that may not be the best word to describe it, but that's the way I think you can get your head around it. So, it works like this, and I'm going to use some terms you may have heard but not quite familiar with if you've been in this space for a while, but I'm going to try to clarify what these terms mean. They're not as hard as they sound. The first thing is a nonce is issued, and a nonce is, and it's spelled Nonce, and if you ever blockchain.info a Bitcoin transaction, you'll see in the TX or in the transaction detail a word called nonce, or if you send Ethereum, you'll see the nonce. A nonce is, the definition of a nonce is a word used once. So it'll issue a string of letters and numbers, and that's called a nonce. And then there's a corresponding value, or it's like completing a sentence that goes at the back of the nonce. And then there's a hash, which is a number of zeros that goes in front of the nonce. Now, how is this figured out? It's done through, in the case of Bitcoin, the mining machines, primarily ASICs miners, accomplish this through what's called brute force. And brute force is simply a hacking tool that a lot of hackers use to where they are able to generate millions, billions, I should say, if not trillions of different combinations of an answer per second. So that's what the computing power is. So the first thing that the mining machine is figuring out, when you hear the machine whistling and buzzing, it's figuring out that nonce, and that's taking a lot of power. So, but now once you have the nonce is deciphered or figured out, the second thing it needs to figure out is the hash. And that's that number of zeros. So it'll take that nonce, that word used once, and it can only be used once. So if a nonce is used and then it's used again on another transaction. So if I send Bitcoin to you and a nonce is used, and then you send that Bitcoin to someone else and someone within the network tries to use that same nonce, it's going to be rejected. It's invalid because a nonce can only be used in the history of the blockchain once. It cannot be used twice. It's invalid data. So once the nonce is established, the leading zeros have to be attached to the nonce. Now, if you can decipher it, it took me a